Alrighty, Roo, and cuckoo choo to you and all my nobody's now watching out there. I'm gonna try to like push it a little faster. I'm sort of lingering and not getting a lot done. And I can admit that. And that's sort of my style, but like, I'm sitting here making too much commentary and not actually getting anything done. I've barely moved it forward, and if I'd just been saying the things, I would like probably be 2 or 3 times the distance, and I don't really said it. I feel like I said so much that was of such great value. So, yeah. And if it encourages others to get into literature, then I'm fulfilling that dream. Monica is really a great leader. Yuri also nods in agreement. Then I'm surprised there aren't more people in the club yet. Well, I mean, how long has it been going on? It must be hard to start a new club. You could put it that way. You could also put it that I'm a tyrannical bitch that only wants the right people in the club. I.e. cute girls. And maybe a cute boy. Wink, wink. Not many people are very interested in putting out all the effort to start something brand new. Especially when it's something that doesn't grab your attention, like literature. I mean, literature does grab people's attention. It just depends on what you're reading. And, you know, the thing about books is there's so many different types of books that there's plenty of people who just read a certain type of book. But they're avid readers, you know? And then there's people who only read like one author, or, you know, or read almost anything and everything. That's hard. It's a very, very wide media. You know? You have to work hard to convince people that you're both fun and worthwhile. Again, like, even just a book club, it's like, they're notoriously difficult to get people to do the thing. A lot of times, housewives or whatever will just take it as an excuse to hang out with their friends and drink wine, and won't even read the book. Won't even like listen to it audio style or cliff notes. They'll just, oh, I didn't have time to read it. It's like, you could have read it in other ways, but okay, whatever, I get it, people are busy, but books take time. But the thing is, reading a book that you're not enjoying is rough. And I like a lot of authors that they have like a lot of time that isn't the most enjoyable thing. Sometimes it really matters and sometimes it doesn't. And it's like, this could have been much shorter. You could have left out all this stuff. It didn't really add much. Like, it helped with the atmosphere, but these characters aren't important. Like, I'm not invested when they die or whatever happens to them. They're just a vehicle to be something in motion, and their character to do that isn't really that important. I'm not going to be like, that doesn't make sense, unless it just truly, truly doesn't. Like, it's not that important. But that's just me. But it makes school events, like the festival, that much more important. I'm confident that we can all really grow this club before we graduate. I mean, hopefully we'll have more than the 3 of you and possibly me, but I'm pretty sure I'm, railroaded into this, so. Right, everyone? Yeah! We'll do our best. You know it! Everyone enthusiastically agrees. That's nice. Such different girls, all interested in the same goal, even if for completely different reasons, and some not even that into the aspect of the actual core of the club. And once again, it looks like Sayori is holding the purple girl's hair. I forget her name. Purple hair girl. Just like, looks like she's holding her hair, just one strand, just like I'm holding it. Okay. Monica must have worked really hard just to find these three. I mean, not sure how that worked out, but yeah. Maybe that's why they were so delighted by the idea of a new member joining. It's like, you know, they're dedicated to it, but it's hard to make happen. So, though, I still don't really know if I can keep up with their level of enthusiasm about literature. It's like, what was the last book I read? Something like that's the character. It's just like something that I couldn't tell these girls because they would all be like, get out! And it's like, I'm a man of culture, get out! So, technique. What kinds of things do you like to read? See, man, it's like I knew. Well, as a man of culture, I'm fond of the adventures of, fuck, I forget what octopi are called, but like, that's not always what it is. But yeah, I don't know. I just like the character. Like he's trying to avoid becoming a NEET at this point. So I don't know. Considering how little I've read these past few years, I don't really have a good way of answering that. Manga! Does that count as literature? I think. I mutter quietly to myself, half joking. Natsuki's head suddenly perks up. It looks like she wants to say something but keeps quiet. That looks like she's supportive of it. If she wanted to say something negative, I think she would have said it. I think maybe manga is like, technically we consider that literature, but we don't like to encourage it. Yuri's just like, not much of a reader, I guess. No, I haven't read The Great Gatsby. And I think IRL, me as a human being, I don't think I've read The Great Gatsby. I've read a bunch of other stuff, you know. I was an avid reader at some point. I really enjoyed reading, and I've read a lot. And then I read more than was required for school. You know, as part of those reading programs that they give you, you know, like, oh, you read more, so you get something for it. I liked, reading was a genuinely enjoyable hobby for me. And not so much right this moment because I'm on a book that I'm not super enjoying. Like, it's like I have it right here next to me. Man, I'm not as far as I thought I was. No, I'm about halfway through with this, and I still have not been hooked on it at all. It hasn't gotten me. I like the author, Chuck Palahniuk, if that's how you say his name. It's Diary. I have many of his books. I've read many of his books. And I enjoy them. And a lot of times there's a little slow burn. There's times where you have to question why you're still reading it. But you push on, and then you get to that point where it's like, it starts to fall together. This one hasn't gotten me there yet. I think that it's deeper in, and it's like, there's the hook. This is why all this... It just seems like there's way too much building, and I'm like... Every time I read it, I don't put the same amount of time and effort into it. So I only read a few pages, and I'm not making a lot of headway. As opposed to the other books where I had a little more time and effort to put into them. And got to that tipping point where it's like, okay, now I'm invested. So it's just been sitting there. I read another book, or at least a good chunk of it, which was very dry but informational and significant, that I liked. It's just great advice that I can't really follow all that well because of my whole mental stuff, but it's interesting and it's good fucking advice, you know? Anyway, moving on. Well, that can change. Yeah. Hey guy, I can change. I know I've been a dirty little bastard, a naughty little bastard. What am I saying? I know I'm just gonna continue to read manga and play video games and watch anime. That's not gonna happen. I spoke without thinking after seeing Yuri's sad smile. Aww. Reflexive. I can be better, but can you? Can you though? I mean, look, the goal is to, especially if you don't know a lot, like if you're not a reader but you want to, it's good to get recommendations from people who can kind of read you and know what you would like. Reading one really good book can get you back into reading. Like, that's how it worked for me. I hadn't read for a long time, and I read Ready Player One after really, really enjoying the movie. And I'm glad I saw it. I've already talked about this before, but like, I really enjoyed the movie, and so I wanted to get the book, and I did, and I went through that sucker in like less than a week, maybe a week and a half max, maybe less than a week, because I just really enjoyed it. It had some dry parts, boring parts. It was very different than the movie, but that was great. And it, you know, in my opinion, better than the movie, but you know, not necessarily the right thing that makes a movie. And then from then, I had some more reasons to read, and my love of reading sort of reignited, and I tried to go out of my way to make a New Year's resolution and change my life around in some ways so that I could read more. And I did. I read a good bit during that year. And then I'm just kind of hit this, and I'm like, I'm not feeling it as much. So it's like, that's why a lot of readers encourage you to have multiple books, because that can happen. Anyway, moving on. Anyway, what about you, Yuri? Yeah, give me some suggestions. Tell me what you read. She's gonna be like, oh, I read a lot of like Shakespeare, romance novels, philosophy stuff. Yeah. Well, let's see. Yuri traces the rim of her teacup with her fingers. My favorites are usually novels that build deep and complex fantasy worlds. Okay. A little surprised by that. But fantasy is a very popular genre. Wouldn't expect it from you, but I don't know, something about you just strikes me as more intellectual and less fantasy. Not that fantasy can't be intellectual, but the fact that you're like rich, deep, complex. It's just, I don't know, I just expected different, but, you know, cool. The level of creativity and craftsmanship behind them is amazing to me. Fantasy is actually pretty cool in that sense, that when it's really well done, especially with like Tolkien, you know, there's a lot of other really great fantasy writers out there. They can, you know, you're like, wow, like, did you isekai and did you come back? And then you're just like, well, I have this whole world that I went to and came back. I had a coma, and then I came out of that coma, and I was like, I had this whole life where I lived in this fantasy world, and I need to share this with the world, because like I was like 30, it was like a lifetime. And telling a good story in such a foreign world is equally impressive. No, that's a good point. Where you have to like, I mean, you can make parallels to the things, and usually that's the case. But being like making up races and how they interact and their rules, and especially if you're gonna give them their own language, and like, you know, it's a little easier now that we have more standardized versions of these things, but back when it was the Wild West of people are just making up stuff for fantasy, they're like, everybody knows about dragons. We'll put those in. Everything being about dragons isn't great. But then being like, no. Like, in Tolkien basically made up hobbits. Halflings, the little people. He made those up. That was a thing of his own. That was his own creation, if I recall correctly. D&D stole it from him, if I recall correctly. They had to change it to halflings. Or maybe it's the reverse, but I think he made up hobbits. And then maybe even orcs and a lot of other stuff. Like, freaking, yeah. Yuri goes on, clearly passionate about her reading. Oh, please don't tell me I'm just dismissively like, yeah. She seems so reserved and timid since the moment I walked in, but it's obvious by the way her eyes light up that she finds her comfort in the world of books, not people. Well, that's what I kind of assumed. I just didn't expect it to be fantasy. But, okay, cool. I wonder what kind of character she would be in one of those things. Based on her build and character design, I would say like a witch or sorceress or something like that. Somebody who has magic that sits back and, you know, is actually quite powerful, but, you know, isn't in the front lines. But, you know, I like a lot of things. Stories with deep psychological elements usually immerse me as well. See, that seemed more her style. Isn't it amazing how a writer can so deliberately take advantage of your own lack of imagination to completely throw you for a loop? That seems like foreshadowing. But yeah, no, that is pretty cool. Anyway, I've been reading a lot of horror lately, and then followed by that. Cool. Which, again, psychological and horror, not always the same thing, but often overlap. I read a horror book once. Which one? Which one did I read? I want to be like they're making a joke and it's not even going to be like a horror book. Let's go with The Shining. It's not that long. I desperately grasp something I can relate to at a minimal level. At this rate, Yuri might as well be having a conversation with a rock. I got a rock. Great. That's super. She's still smiling, but it's just like she's sort of in her own world, just talking at me. But it's because I can't participate. I can't keep up. Really? I wouldn't have expected that, Yuri. See, that's what I would have been more inclined to expect, rather than the fantasy. But I guess you know her, and now she's sort of sharing some stuff that she doesn't normally share. For someone as gentle as you. Nah, a lot of times those are the people into it. Okay, so they moved them to say who's talking, but I was just like, she's just like, I don't know, grew. I guess you could say that. But if a story makes me think, or it takes me to another world, then I really can't put it down. That's the thing. Even something that's not particularly that can still engross you. It doesn't have to be super fantastical. Surreal horror is often very successful at changing the way you look at the world, if only for a brief moment. Yeah. You see something or read or watch or whatever, something that's like it like alters your, like it introduces a new concept or thought that never crossed your mind, or you know, it's like a living nightmare that you don't have to personally interact in a way that you're like in person. And it's like, whoa, so glad that's not a thing. I hate horror. You strike me as you like a lot of romance stuff, but you probably don't want to admit that. I would have thought you would have been into fantasy. Maybe like stuff that's a little more dramatic. I don't know. Let's see what you got to say. Oh, why is that? Well, I get scared. Natsuki's eyes dart over to me for a split second. Never mind. Yeah, no, I'm not going to mention that I'm actually, like, one of those girls that has to hide the books that she reads because it's often considered smut, even though it's not, or maybe it is. I don't know. She'll sit there and read it and just be, like, doing that face where it's got, like, a little jewel, and she's just like, hey. Good times. That's right. You usually like to write about cute things, don't you, Natsuki? So she writes rather than is doing the reading thing? Maybe they don't have a writing club and this is like, what? What gives you that idea? I mean, it feels like you would have mentioned it. You left a piece of scrap paper behind at the last club meeting. Oh, okay. It looked like you were working on a poem called Oh, it's Poetry. Nice. Don't say it out loud. And give that back. Fine, fine. Your cupcakes, your poems. She's like, look, fuck you if some of my hobbies are like very kawaii waifu material. I'm still tsundere, and so you know, that fits with the trope. You can just suck it, okay? Suck an egg. Just because I like, just get off my. I'm gonna need you to get all the way off my back. That's cute, though. I mean, that's, you know, good for you. Everything you do is just as cute as you are. Sayori doing Sayori things, saying Sayori things for Sayori reasons. Sayori slides up behind Natsuki and puts her hands on her shoulders. Of course, they always have to do that. Somebody always has to be very touchy to the tsundere. Like, physically forceful, especially when they're small. That just seems to be a thing. Like, not in a bad way, but it's sort of like, I don't know. It's just kind of a trope, and it's like, maybe it's a bad way, but maybe it's also making them confront themselves and their own self-repression. I'm not cute! Well, I mean, everybody here is cute in some way. And you're definitely the most kawaii in the sense that you're all, like, chibi-ish. You know, you're the smallest, most petite, and you have pink hair, and you made little kitty cat cupcakes. So, that checks a lot of boxes. You're just tsundere. Natsuki, you write your own poems? Well, I guess sometimes. I think poetry is a very good way of self-expression. Poetry can, like, be therapy, you know? It's not for everybody. People don't really read poetry anymore. But I feel like poetry is sort of like journaling. You know, not everybody does it, but I think it's good if you do. Why do you care? Actually, I don't. I was just looking for a weak link to cut you down with. I'll use this as ammo later. It's like, what the fuck? It's like, I'm trying to be part of the group, and, you know, I think revealing or being outed as a poet or a person who writes poems is that's sort of a vulnerable position because it's not necessarily widely received. And I think it's cool. Yeah, I think that's impressive. See? Even my character does, and he's like, I don't belong here. Why don't you share them sometime? Okay, you may have overstepped there, buddy. It's your first day. You should slow your roll. You should maybe put your foot off the gas just a little bit. That's a lot to ask of anybody. Yeah. No. Natsuki averts her eyes. Yeah, no. Yeah, you may have gone too far. You wouldn't like them. I mean, very possibly. You could be a terrible poet. You could be a great poet. And it could still be like, reading this is uncomfortable for any number of reasons. And some people just don't appreciate poetry. Not a very confident writer yet. You show me a confident writer. Show me one. And I'd be like, are they worth a lot of money? Do they have, like, the evidence validating them? And then I'd still be like, there's not that many. And if they are super confident, chances are they're not really that great. Unless they have both of those, like, you know, those things. And at that point, it's sort of like they've gotten over that, where it's like, I don't need to be confident. I feel like writers are inherently insecure. It's a natural trait of being a writer, at least certain types of writing. And I think just writing in general. I think fucking putting words down onto a piece of paper is kind of scary, because you can destroy the paper, or you can type it out and you can delete it or whatever, but especially since a lot of people don't do that so much anymore, except for when they're forced to, that when you do it, it's like a choice and it's like personal, and that reflection upon yourself can be it's a very vulnerable state. I understand how Natsuki feels. Sharing that level of writing takes more than just confidence, especially poetry. Not just like a story or something. You know, it's like, oh, we had to write a story for the creative writing class we're in. We're sharing it because we're all in literature club. That's one thing. But poetry is like, it's very personal. The truest form of writing is writing to oneself. Huh. I need a second to think about that, and I'm not sure how long this has been going on, and I would like to ponder that for a moment, so I'm going to end this. I want to think about that. The truest form of writing is writing to oneself. Huh.